The alien general was still laughing when the screen cut to static. His golden goblet slipped from his fingers, sloshing purple wine across the tactical map, right as Earth's final encrypted message crackled through the Dominion war feed. Only 2 words. Release him. The room went silent. Every alien in that high command war chamber, from the youngest tactician to the ancient warlords with bio-augmented skulls, froze as if time had cracked. Then came the secondary signal, a priority code sealed centuries ago by Earth's own Planetary Defense Council. They had opened Protocol Sandstone. General Koran of the Zarn Dominion had conquered 17 worlds before his second growth cycle. He'd crushed civilizations with orbital spear barrages, erased underwater cities with atmospheric pressure bombs, and boasted often that human warfare was nothing but fireworks and shouting. He especially loved mocking Earth's obsession with symbolic soldiers, always laughing at the ancient armor humans still displayed in museums like sacred relics. Koran once asked in a diplomatic broadcast why humans loved pointing swords at plasma tanks. Now, he wasn't laughing. Across the command table, one of his lieutenants looked up and whispered, almost afraid of the words, "They've activated the last vault. The old one." In the ruins of Buenos Aires, buried beneath 2 miles of sealed steel and hardened earth, a security terminal blinked for the first time in 9 centuries. 2 nervous officers, both no older than 30, stood at the final biometric gate. One was tapping nervously against his thigh. The other whispered, "I thought this was just a myth. Some kind of war bedtime story." The first didn't answer. He simply turned the key. Beneath their feet, massive gears rotated. Dust drifted through the air like ancient ash. The vault hissed open. Inside stood a single containment pod, vertical, large enough for a small vehicle, crusted in warning signs etched in over 60 languages. Earth's defense grid had buried it deep for a reason. The man inside didn't look like a superweapon. He didn't glow. He didn't have augments. His body was wrapped in primitive armor that looked carved from meteor stone. A heavy red cape hung motionless behind him. His face was weathered but calm, and a tattoo of a broken spear ran across his jawline. His nameplate was nothing but a codename. Thalos. The officers stared as the pod began to hum. One stammered, "Do we talk to him?" The other backed away slowly. "I think we just survive." As the chamber's inner atmosphere equalized, Thalos opened his eyes. He didn't move at first. Then he cracked his neck, rolled his shoulders, and simply said, "They still teach formation drills, right?" One of the officers nodded, confused. Thalos smirked and added, "First mistake." In orbit, the Zarn Dominion's warships were organizing for final planetary suppression. Their AI war log predicted 0 resistance within 48 hours. Earth's continental grids had collapsed. Defense satellites were offline. Civilian transmissions were a mix of chaos and begging. General Koran, ever the theatrical tactician, ordered a full-force landing on the southern plains. It was more of a parade than a battle. He wanted to be seen. He wanted to walk across Earth's soil and step on their pride. As he broadcast his arrival, he made jokes about Earth's military doctrine being written by poets, not generals. When his command ship landed, Koran emerged wearing ceremonial gold plates and carrying a curved sword in mockery. "Let us meet their legend," he shouted to the crowd of alien media drones. On the ground, Thalos watched the broadcast on a cracked holoscreen surrounded by dust and silence. He listened to every insult. Then he stood, tightened the strap on his shoulder guard, and picked up his weapon. It was not a plasma cannon. It was a war staff fused with what looked like primitive circuitry and carved bone. Behind him, a young corporal stepped forward and asked, "Do you need backup?" Thalos tilted his head. "Yes," he said after a pause. "But not the kind you're thinking of. Get me 12 men with no illusions of glory. We move at dusk." Hours later, the first alien patrols on the southern ridge started disappearing. At first, it was chalked up to terrain confusion. Then came the silence. No telemetry. No visuals. Just static. When a scout drone finally caught a glimpse of something, an overhead shot of what looked like spear points in the dirt forming a message. It took the Dominion servers 30 seconds to translate the glyph. The message read too loud. Try again. Meanwhile, the Los and his chosen 12 were moving through dry canyons using footwork that confused even Earth's motion trackers. He didn't speak much. He didn't issue commands the usual way. Instead, he drew lines in the dirt, then stepped back and waited. When one soldier made a suggestion to use drones, the Los said, "They see drones. They don't see shadows." When asked what the plan was, he said, "Break rhythm. Confuse instincts. If they start scanning for heat, we crawl through ice. If they expect steel, we give them rock. And if they want glory—" He paused and looked at the night sky. "We let them stand on the hill. Then we cut it out from beneath." By morning, alien command logs were filled with discrepancies. Their AI couldn't compute the lack of resistance combined with rising losses. Koran was enraged. He summoned his tactical council and demanded projections. The AI responded. "Enemy using outdated formations, environmental masking, non-digital disruptions. Cannot calculate effectiveness." Koran shouted. "Then erase their history and write your own." The room was silent again. Someone whispered, "It's not their history. It's his." The Los stood at a cliff overlooking the southern field, watching dropships land in perfect formations. He counted the seconds between their ground pulses. He watched the guards pacing. Then he turned to his 12. "I need 2 to paint fire signals across the hills. 2 to dig out the ravines near the canyon mouth. The rest of you," he pointed toward the drop zone, "walk into their camp. Give them a false target. Then vanish." One soldier hesitated. "We'll get caught." The Los raised an eyebrow. "You're not supposed to escape. You're supposed to scatter them." By the time the sun was fully overhead, a new broadcast hit every channel in the Dominion fleet. It was from an unknown human relay. The camera shook. There was no dramatic speech. No anthem. Just one long shot of General Koran's statue, built in anticipation of his victory, tumbling face first into the dirt. The feed ended with a wide-angle shot of smoke signals forming a single massive glyph visible from orbit. The translation came slow. Every Zarn translator choked when they read it aloud. "Now we hunt." Koran stared at the smoke from orbit. His hands shook. For the first time in his life, the predator felt like prey. And somewhere in the ruins of Earth, the Los smiled and whispered, "Let the war begin the right way." The Dominion War Council had always measured victory through numbers. Casualties, unit strength, orbital dominance, and predictive modeling based on 10,000 prior campaigns. That logic had never failed them. Until now. Overnight, the southern hemisphere was cloaked in sensor static. Not from solar interference or human jamming, but from environmental interference their algorithms couldn't explain. Temperatures shifted rapidly across flat plains. Echoes bounced from places that had no walls. Their topographical scans had begun to loop. Worst of all, multiple scout teams had vanished, leaving only damaged equipment and spears driven straight through Zarn body armor with surgical precision. General Koran stood in the middle of his mobile command tent, fuming. His once confident tacticians now whispered quietly, heads lowered, unsure whether they were facing resistance or something older. He slammed his fist into the metal table and barked, "It's not magic. It's not ghosts. It's 1 man and 12 locals. Find them." In the ravine east of the landing fields, the Los crouched beside a makeshift map made of rocks, twigs, and bones. His fingers traced curved patterns through the dirt. Opposite him, the 12 recruits studied his movements with tense focus. These were not elite soldiers. They were remnants. Survivors of past battles. Former medics, engineers, civilians who had picked up rifles when their homes fell. What they lacked in training, they made up for in silence. The Los had chosen them for one reason only: they listened. He looked up and said, "The enemy marches forward because their system only knows forward. So we give them forward. Over and over. Until they step into the circle." One of the recruits, a quiet woman named Sarah, tilted her head. What happens when they do? The Los didn't answer immediately. He stood and scanned the ridge above. There, several dozen Dominion soldiers were conducting a sweep. Their armor gleamed like scaled beetles, weapons mounted to forearms, eyes scanning with thermal and pulse detection. The Los murmured. They walk in rows. Perfect rows. Not one step off pattern. Then he smiled. They're not here to adapt. They're here to dominate. That makes them predictable. Far above them, the Dominion surveillance drones buzzed, scanning for life. But the Los had rigged the canyon with ancient tricks. Pools of cold water beneath inverted stone slabs reflected heat signatures. Reed patches that mimicked humanoid movement rustled in timed cycles, tricking motion sensors. Dead bodies, dressed in scavenged alien gear, were hung upside down in thermal pockets to pull search efforts away. The result was chaos in the Dominion's command logs. Every skin contradicted the last. Each patrol that followed thermal pings found nothing. Drones spotted movement, fired, and hit old boots filled with dry meat. The Dominion's own logic grid began to fragment under the strain. Their predictive models now classified Earth resistance as nonlinear threat engagement, high chaos probability, strategic inconsistency. A warning was added beneath. Caution, unknown algorithm conflict. Meanwhile, the Los trained the 12 with a level of focus that bordered on ritual. He taught them silence and motion, how to breathe between footsteps, how to mask their scent with ash and soil, how to use a dead Dominion helmet to reflect false radio echoes. When one recruit asked why they didn't just use Earth's remaining guns, the Los took one and smashed it against a rock. He said, "They expect bullets. They don't expect their own men missing their eyes." Another asked why he never used shields. The Los replied, "Shields protect the body. I aim for their mind." At dusk, he led them to the edge of a dried riverbed. Across the ridge, Dominion forces had set up a supply route. Convoys moved between camps, guarded by rotating watchtowers and aerial scouts. On paper, it was perfect. On the ground, it was a death trap. The Los pointed to the tall grass surrounding the supply lanes. This was a river once. The soil remembers. He knelt, scooped up a handful of loose sediment, and let it pour through his fingers. We flood it. Then we burn it. They'll think Earth is opening its own veins. Overnight, they sabotaged a distant pipeline using stolen Dominion charge packs. Water flowed back into the ravine. Then came the dry reed bundles, soaked in fuel, buried just beneath the surface. By morning, Dominion vehicles moved through the now muddy trail, unaware they were driving through a trap built from centuries-old terrain. At the exact moment the Los raised his hand, the 12 lit the fuse lines. The ground burst into fire not with heat but confusion. The burning reeds emitted thick black smoke that shorted sensors. Vehicle systems failed. Panic spread. Through the smoke, figures moved, silent, fast, and unseen. By the time the flames faded, the supply column was gone. Not destroyed. Gone. Stripped clean. Not one soldier survived. Coran's command interrupted in fury when the news arrived. His advisors argued over sensor failures, sabotage, and the complete loss of an entire armored column. One of them tried to explain the historical tactics being used. Coran snapped. "This is the age of spaceflight, not swordplay." The advisor replied, trembling. "That's the point. He's making us forget what century we're in." Elsewhere, the 12 stared in disbelief at the crates now stored in the cave behind the Los. Plasma cores. Medical nanogel. Drone cores. Alien armor being retrofitted with human wiring. The Los inspected the hall, then sat down and poured a circle of salt around the weapons. Sarah asked why. He replied, "To remind us. These aren't trophies. They're bait." That evening, a Dominion emergency beacon was activated in the scorched supply zone. It broadcast a false distress signal in the humans' old military code. When Dominion soldiers arrived to investigate, they found half their own equipment piled neatly in a circle. In the center, a Dominion helmet was balanced on a broken earth rifle. Underneath it was a single human boot print, perfectly pressed into the dirt, pointing west. The pattern was unmistakable. The Los wasn't hiding. He was luring. The tactic unnerved the Dominion's Second Fleet commander, High Strategist Vec. He urged General Coran to delay the next drop until they had more control. Coran refused. He wanted a message sent. He gathered his finest combat engineers and ordered the construction of a ceremonial base, an outpost to show Earth that the Dominion was here to stay. One made of steel, tall towers, glowing banners, and statues of conquest. He called it Outpost Triumph. Delos heard about the outpost 3 hours later. He sat in the dark, eating dry roots and chewing slowly. One of the 12 asked what they'd do now. Delos simply said, "They've built a temple to their own blindness." He drew a simple pattern in the dirt, 3 dots and a circle. "That's not a base. That's a stage. Let's give them a show." By nightfall, Dominion scouts patrolling the perimeter of Outpost Triumph began reporting strange sounds. Horns echoing from far hills. Rhythmic thumping like drums, though none could identify a source. One reported seeing moving shadows in the statue's reflections. Another claimed they saw a figure standing motionless just outside the sensor range, watching. The night sky above Outpost Triumph pulsed with artificial light. Dominion banners flapped from high towers, their metallic sheen reflecting the rotating searchlights. From a distance, it looked secure, fortified, untouchable. But beneath that polished surface, the soldiers inside were anything but calm. Patrols doubled. Commanders barked conflicting orders. Surveillance tech kept malfunctioning without explanation. One guard swore he saw movement along the western wall, only for the camera to show nothing but wind-blown dust. Another reported static in his comms whenever he approached the outer statues. They dismissed the rumors at first. Fatigue, stress, atmospheric interference. But the stories spread like wildfire. A name whispered through the barracks. Not human. Not alien. Just a shadow they called the Old One. Delos never approached directly. He didn't have to. He worked through space, time, and fear. At one of the abandoned ruins near the northern ridge, he had the 12 set up mock camps, fires burning, crates scattered, even freshly butchered meat. Dominion scouts found it the next day and logged it as a temporary resistance base. When they returned 12 hours later with a strike force, everything was gone. Not destroyed, clean. Like no one had ever been there. The fires were still warm. Even the blood trail from the meat vanished. But they found one thing left behind. A Dominion data pad. Except when activated, it didn't show maps. It played an old Earth video of ancient battlefield drills, humans practicing spear formations, smoke signals, hand gestures. Underneath the feed was a simple file labeled README. The message inside said only this: "You're standing in the wrong century." Back at Outpost Triumph, General Coran had lost patience. His face twitched with every report. This wasn't a war. This was a performance. He hated it. He wanted clear targets, open engagements, explosions. Instead, he was being toyed with by a man who didn't even use a rifle. He called an emergency meeting and demanded updates. Vec spoke first, trying to remain calm. He said they had traced the movement patterns and were beginning to see a structure. "It's not random," Vec explained. "It's a misdirection grid. He pushes our sensors east, then moves west. He uses terrain against us. Sometimes he doesn't even strike. He just makes us think he did. Our men are breaking ranks chasing shadows." Coran slammed his fist against the table. "So stop chasing and bring him to us." The room went quiet. One younger tactician, who hadn't yet learned fear, proposed a plan. He suggested broadcasting a live challenge. An open insult to Delos. Baiting him out. Coran liked it. It would be public. It would be humiliating. And above all, it would shift the narrative back to Dominion control. Preparations began within the hour. A stage was set on the north end of the outpost. Cameras hovered in formation. An alien musician played a percussive anthem beneath the towering statue of Coran himself. Then the general stepped forward and spoke. His voice boomed in every quadrant. He called Delos a fossil. He mocked his weapons, his tactics, even his armor. He pulled a replica of Thalos's war staff from a display rack and snapped it theatrically over his knee. Laughter echoed through the command feed. Koran ended with a final line that was rehearsed for effect. If Earth must rely on ghosts to win battles, then let them die again. There was no immediate response. The speech was uploaded and broadcast across Dominion-controlled territory. Troops cheered. Civilians watching from orbit felt reassured. But back on Earth, in a cave lit only by smoldering embers, Delos watched it in silence. He said nothing until the end. Then he exhaled slowly and whispered, "He's declared himself bait." Sarah sat beside him, sharpening a blade. She glanced at the screen and asked, "So we're taking the bait?" Delos shook his head. "No. We're moving the trap. We don't attack the lion in the open. We make the den collapse." The next day, Dominion engineers began to experience failures in their shield generators. Not major, just enough to cause flickering. Unexplainable energy pulses shorted out several lights in the western wing. A troop transport vanished en route to a supply outpost. Hours later, it was found parked upright against a canyon wall with no sign of struggle and every weapon missing. Inside was a single piece of earth parchment. It read, "Welcome to Triumph. Try not to get lost." Then came the real strike. Not an assault. A removal. The central processing unit for Outpost Triumph's surveillance network was lifted from its underground housing without alerting a single guard. When the Dominion discovered the breach, they found not one broken lock, not one damaged panel. Just a handwritten note inside the server's core port. It said, "I borrowed your eyes." Koran's fury reached its peak. He demanded retaliation. If they couldn't find Delos, they would erase everything around him. Villages. Forest canyons. Orbital strikes were authorized. Fire rained across Earth's southern landmass. Forests were incinerated. Ruins flattened. Koran watched with satisfaction, believing he was purging the board. But it was Delos who had led him there. While the Dominion wiped out nothing of strategic value, Delos used their distraction to move. With the 12, he breached the outer cargo ring of Outpost Triumph. Not to destroy. To rearrange. They replaced crates with dummies. Swapped energy cores with overcharged decoys. Moved explosives near fuel tanks but left them dormant. They left a trail of disorder so subtle it couldn't be detected until too late. As Dominion Command restored internal systems, a sudden blackout hit. All lights, sensors, and comms went dark. Emergency power flickered on, just enough to illuminate the massive golden statue of Koran at the center of the outpost. But something had changed. Now the statue had a rope around its neck. The rope wasn't there before. And next to it, balanced on the statue's shoulder, was Thalos's war staff. The real one. Before anyone could move, Dominion barracks doors slammed shut. Explosions triggered across the outer ring, not to kill, but to confuse. Gates locked. Lights spun. Every exit routed soldiers into corridors that led back to the central square. When they finally reached it, they found only a message projected across the statue's chest. "You challenged." I answered. By the time the backup command arrived, Delos and his 12 were gone. Not a single Dominion soldier had died. But none had slept. None had won. And the next day, dozens of Dominion troops submitted transfer requests. Some deserted. And worse still, rumors began to spread not just among soldiers, but in Dominion cities. Rumors that Earth was not resisting. It was teaching. Koran destroyed the war staff in a rage. But even that had no satisfaction. Because deep inside the Dominion network, someone had uploaded a recording. The footage showed Koran's speech overlaid with images of Earth's past warriors, generals, tribes, rebels. All layered beneath the same mocking voice. The video ended with a line spoken in Dominion tongue, but perfectly human in tone. "War is not your game. It is our memory." The Dominion's grip on Earth began to slip not through explosions, but through hesitation. Uncertainty crept into every rank. Patrols slowed. Commanders double-checked orders that would have once been executed without question. The fear wasn't physical anymore. It had become structural. Every map they read could be a lie. Every sensor ping could be bait. Every dark corner could hide the warrior who moved like smoke. The chain of command bent under the weight of doubt. And Los hadn't fired a single shot in days. In the mountains beyond the southern range, Los stood overlooking a valley where the Dominion had begun constructing a new forward base. It was ugly and practical, no statues, no theatrics this time. Koran had ordered function over form, hoping to remove the symbolic vulnerability that had haunted Outpost's triumph. But the Los saw something else. Desperation. They were building faster. Making mistakes. Reusing damaged materials. He crouched beside a slope of loose shale and pressed his hand into the dirt. The land was unstable. The weight of the new base would shift the ground within days. He didn't need to destroy it. He only needed time. One of the 12 approached from behind, breathing heavy. He had climbed the full slope alone. He said Dominion supply ships had stopped their usual patterns. No scheduled drops. No fresh fuel cells. Even medpacks were being rationed. It wasn't sabotage. It was collapse. The Dominion's logistical system had stopped trusting its own data. Every change in Earth's terrain had to be triple verified. Every new structure had to be scanned twice. Delays piled into paralysis. The Los nodded once. They were approaching the edge of the cliff, not geographically, but psychologically. Then he looked to the sky and whispered, "Now we push." Back in Dominion orbit, Koran stood in silence before a massive viewing panel. Beyond the reinforced glass stretched the curve of Earth, glowing in fragments of daylight and cloud cover. His second-in-command Vec waited behind him, unsure whether to speak. Koran finally broke the silence. He said, "When I was a hatchling, I watched my first planetary purge. They called it clean war. No resistance. No delay. Just overwhelming superiority." He turned and stared into Vec's eyes. "That's what this was supposed to be. And now I can't even trust the hillside." Vec shifted nervously. He had spent the last several cycles reviewing Earth's warfare history, trying to find a pattern in the chaos. What he discovered disturbed him more than any failed scan. Earth had a pattern. It wasn't tactical. It was philosophical. Every time Earth had been conquered, it hadn't stayed conquered. Empires bled out trying to hold it. He said as much. Koran didn't react. Then Vec added one more detail. He said that in ancient Earth legends, there was always a final warrior. A last protector who appeared only when all others failed. Different names and different cultures. Always the same idea. Not the strongest. Not the fastest. Just the one who couldn't be predicted. Koran dismissed it. He said if this Delos was their myth, he'd make him real and then crush him in front of his own people. Vec didn't reply. But in his mind, he wasn't so sure anymore which one of them was being crushed. On the surface, Delos led the 12 through a narrow canyon whose walls shimmered with ore and glass. The place had once been used for mining. Now it was abandoned and silent. He marked 4 positions along the rim and instructed his team to place reflectors salvaged from Dominion drones. Not weapons, just polished metal. Sarah asked what the purpose was. He said when they move forward, we make them look backward. She frowned, then understood. It was about confusion. About disrupting instinct. Not defeating the enemy but unbuilding their certainty, one brick at a time. That night, a Dominion recon team moved through the canyon. Their sensors pinged multiple heat signatures. They split into formation and moved with textbook precision. But when they reached the source, they found reflective surfaces bouncing back their own body heat. The ground shifted under them. The walls shimmered. They weren't in a canyon. They were in a trap. An old one, older than the war. A natural echo chamber where sound and heat multiplied. The Los didn't even attack. He let them retreat. He wanted the fear to return with them. 2 days later, the Dominion held a closed-door strategy council. Attendance was half. Some officers had refused to show. Others had gone dark. Koran ordered the reactivation of the Voltex protocol, a scorched earth system meant for final stage planetary purges. Vec objected, saying it would destroy not only human resistance but the land itself. Koran didn't care. He said if the land obeys him, then take the land too. But before they could authorize the launch codes, the screens across the command chamber went black. Then a single image appeared. The Dominion statue of Koran from Outpost Triumph, except now it was buried face down in a river. A soft drumbeat began to play, slow and steady. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated through the floor. Then came the voice. It wasn't Thalas's. It was a human child's, reading from a script in perfect Dominion language. The words were old. They came from an Earth war manual written before the first alien ever looked at the stars. It said a general who needs fire to win has already lost the flame within. The Voltex protocol was suspended. Vex stared at the blackened screen, realizing they had just lost control of their own communication grid. Earth wasn't just resisting on the ground. It had entered their machines. The command room doors were sealed until the breach was cleared. Koran raged against the walls, knowing it wasn't a glitch. It was a message. He was being studied. He was being allowed to lose. The Los and his 12 had returned to the highlands where snow touched the tips of shattered satellite dishes. The sky was clear, and he could see the faint blink of Dominion vessels in orbit. He motioned for Sarah to hand him the last beacon, one they had salvaged from the first scout ship to fall. He planted it into the ice, activated its pulse, and stepped back. The signal it emitted wasn't a location marker. It was a mimic. It replicated Dominion Authority signals and redirected command inputs. From orbit, it would appear like a planetary headquarters. The ships would focus their attention downward. And when they did, the real wave would rise behind them. For now, the Los sat at the ridge, overlooking the valley below. Dominion forces were gathered in confusion, unsure where to strike, afraid to move, waiting for a signal that would never come. Behind him, Earth's last free networks were beginning to reconnect. Fighters hidden in caves. Engineers rebuilding satellites from scrap. Farmers who had buried rifles with their grandparents now dusting them off. The Los didn't call them. He didn't need to. They had seen the signal. They had heard the drums. And in that silence, Earth began to remember itself. Koran stood alone in his private chamber, watching old Earth footage. One clip showed soldiers in lines. Then guerrillas in forests. Then a single man with a spear facing a tank. He couldn't look away. And when the feed ended, there was one frame left on screen. It wasn't historical. It was recent. It showed the Los standing outside a Dominion outpost, lit by fire, unarmed. Under the image was a sentence. You've already lost. You just haven't realized how yet. The transmission that finally broke Dominion morale didn't come from Earth's military or any official resistance group. It came from a stolen Dominion relay station buried beneath the Andes, repurposed by the Los and 2 of the 12 who had spent 3 days underground in total silence rerouting its power grid. The message played on loop across Dominion vessels, cities, even private military bunkers. At first, it seemed like a corrupted file. Just static. Then it unfolded. The footage showed Dominion soldiers, dead, alive, confused, facing traps they couldn't predict, maps they couldn't read, enemies they couldn't see. Then came a sequence of Earth children drawing stick figures with spears surrounding armored giants. Then an audio clip, grainy and glitching. It was General Koran's voice from one of his past war speeches, chopped, remixed, broken. The line repeated over and over, warped with distortion. I cannot lose. I cannot lose. I cannot lose. Until finally, the words merged into silence. Then a new voice came through. The Los. Only one sentence. You already did. Across Dominion ranks, chaos erupted. Troopers began removing their insignia. Whole divisions refused to patrol. Supply ships stopped launching. The automated logistics grid tried to reassign resources, but the field inputs no longer made sense. Reports from Earth claimed that Dominion troops were falling into what they called illusion zones, areas where terrain seemed to shift mid-march. Their own soldiers couldn't tell real from reflection. What the Los had built wasn't just resistance. It was doubt as infrastructure. In the final days of Dominion occupation, the remaining command attempted to relocate their central base to the northern hemisphere. They chose a plateau high above the cloud line, believing elevation would give them better sensor range and fewer ambush risks. It was a calculated move, one that ignored every lesson learned over the last several weeks. The Los didn't stop them. He allowed the base to be built. He allowed them to settle. Then he sent one drone, an Earth relic from a pre-satellite age, a camera drone with physical rotors and a scratched lens. It hovered above the plateau and dropped a single package. It landed in the courtyard of the Dominion base, triggering alarms. Inside was a datapad. It contained no virus, no hack, no explosion. Just a list. A short, clean list of every Dominion general who had insulted Earth tactics in their internal memos. At the top was Koran's name. At the bottom, it read, "We didn't forget." Koran saw the footage from orbit. His hands trembled. His voice barely rose above a whisper. He asked how the list had been compiled. No one answered. No one could. There had been no network breach. No satellite link. It was written by someone who already knew. Someone watching before the war began. Someone ancient enough to wait. The final confrontation wasn't a battle. Not in the way Koran expected. He landed personally on Earth, flanked by what remained of his honor guard. No ceremony. No broadcast. He didn't want an audience. He wanted an end. He marched through what had once been Outpost Triumph, now reduced to a field of scorched metal and melted statues. At the center stood the Los, unarmed, wearing nothing but the ancient war cloth and cape that had survived hundreds of years beneath Earth's crust. Koran stopped 10 paces away and drew his blade. It hissed with plasma, glowing hot. He said nothing. Neither did the Los. The fight was short. Koran swung first, confident, brutal, elegant in form. But the Los moved with a rhythm that didn't match any recorded combat style. He moved like wind across stone, dodging, redirecting, exhausting his enemy with angles and silence. Koran's strikes became slower, more desperate. When he finally overextended, the Los stepped in and disarmed him with a move that seemed more like a dance than a strike. The blade fell. The Los caught it. Then, to the shock of everyone watching from the hidden resistance camps, he placed it on the ground and stepped back. Koran fell to his knees. He had never been wounded. Not physically. But something deeper had cracked. The realization that this war had never been about firepower. That he had never faced an army. He had faced memory. A legacy. A refusal to be forgotten. The Los turned and walked away, leaving the once mighty general kneeling in the ruins of his own arrogance. Within hours, the Dominion called for full withdrawal. Not just from Earth. From all outer colonies where resistance had suddenly ignited. Inspired by Earth's example, smaller worlds began their own uprisings. Dominion officers defected. Military academies once focused on algorithmic warfare now began to teach unpredictability. Chaos drills. Human doctrine. The Los became a symbol, not of strength, but of patience. Of history. Of the danger of forgetting who you are. On Earth, the 12 dispersed. Some returned to their old lives. Some vanished into new wars. Sarah stayed with the Los the longest. She helped bury the last beacon deep in the Arctic ice, its signal programmed to awaken only if Earth ever again faced a threat it could not calculate. Before they parted, she asked him what he would do now. He said nothing at first. Then he looked at the sky and said, "I wait for the next mistake." Years passed. Stories spread. Some called him a ghost. Others a myth. But those who had fought beside him knew better. He was real. As real as fire in the cold. As real as memory in the dark. Dominion children were taught his name not as an enemy, but as a lesson. And carved into the war memorial that stood where Outpost Triumph once towered, a single line was etched without flourish or rank. He came not to conquer, but to remind.